Hey, this is Louis Ozawa from Hunters on Amazon Prime. I'm here talking to Elias on the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to the party, pal!
You're my boy, Blue!
Yo, Adrian!
A podcast with interviews of amazing guests from the world of pop culture.
Oh, yeah!
TV.
Nice!
Movies.
Oh, I love the movies!
Comedy and more. From deep inside the Man Cave, your host, Elias.
Louis, welcome to the cave.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How are you, man? What's new with you?
I'm pretty good. Just hanging out in the vestibule of a warm entrance at Chelsea Market because it's freezing in New York right now.
Well, I don't. I'm in Massachusetts, so I know all about it. It's cold.
Oh, there you go. I live in LA now, so I've gotten a bit soft.
Yeah. So yeah, you've been busy the last few years. You've done various TV shows and film appearances. You know, like Bosch, Kidding, Supergirl. You've done a few movies, The Bourne Legacy, Predators, and now you start Amazon Prime's video Hunters, which we'll talk about that. But I want the listeners to get to know a little bit more about you. Where are you originally from?
Born and raised in New York. Born in Flushing, Queens, but raised in Manhattan.
Oh, wow. How was it? How was it growing up there?
You know, it's hard to compare, but now that I have a son growing up in LA, I realize that my upbringing was a little different from the rest of America, most of America, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Manhattan, of all places, yeah. So, yeah.
How old's your son?
He's almost 4, almost 5, and then I have another son who's just born, so 4.5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you enjoy parenthood?
Yeah, it's tough, man. In our business, we have to travel a lot. So right now, my poor wife is alone at home with. We actually have 3 sons because we call him our firstborn, but we have a dog named Atticus, and so it's all boys in our house. So she's a little tired, just to say.
I believe it. I have 2 kids myself, so I know all about it.
Oh yeah.
So growing up in New York as a kid, what were you into?
I was into sports, to be honest. I had toyed with a little acting as a child. Full disclosure, my first gig was a Jell-O pudding commercial with Bill Cosby.
Oh wow!
Of all people, yeah, which was a cool story to share when I was younger.
Yeah,
has a very different connotation now, but I was one of those Jell-O pudding kids growing up, and that was my entree into acting. And my parents, they didn't have too much money, so when it came time for me to join the union, they decided that it'd be better for me to have a normal childhood, which I'm thankful for, and become a young child actor. Yeah.
So like growing up, like how did you decide like you wanted to get into acting? Was it like a specific TV show or movie or?
I gotta say, I didn't. I think it was when I saw Goodfellas, to be honest.
Great movie.
And then that opened up a whole world of kind of older like movies, like The Godfather, and it just opened up my world. And so, ironically, it was guys like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro that really made me want to become an actor. Well, not ironically, they were the biggest stars of the time, But
yeah,
it was cool to see these kind of Italian Americans kind of taking over Hollywood and playing the coolest roles. And as an Asian American with no role models out there, I kind of used them as surrogates for me as a way of kind of learning about, I guess manhood, and I guess about being an actor. Yeah. Yeah.
So like when you told your parents that this is what you wanted to do, like what was their reaction?
My parents aren't the typical Asian parents. They're not my father is neither a doctor nor a lawyer. My mother is an artist. When she was younger, she dabbled in acting and modeling. So I think from my mother's point of view, she always saw me as a creative kid, and she always knew that maybe I would end up in the arts.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were pretty supportive. I think it was hard for them to see me struggling for so many years and being so poor for so many years. But we never had that much money in my family, so money was never really being rich was never something that we really talked about or cared about.
Yeah. No, when you were younger, did you take acting lessons? How did you get all involved in that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was into martial arts. I was into football. I was a swimmer. I was into sports. And honestly, like in high school, I was all about sports and girls. That was my life. And then I got to college, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I'm neither good enough of an athlete to live off of this, nor does just hanging out and partying gonna support me. And so I kind of stumbled upon an intro to acting course. I wasn't a drama major or anything like that, and the teacher was so good and really was supportive and said, "Hey, you got some talent. Why don't you try auditioning for the play, school plays here in college?" And I, on a whim, I auditioned. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Yeah. And somehow I end up in a play, and then was hanging out on spring break in LA on somebody's couch. And there were like 4 of us young guys lying on couches, sleeping on floors. And this dude that was staying there was an agent at a new agency. And he was like, "Hey, you got a good look. I think maybe we can work together." Before I knew it, I had an agent. And kind of went like that for many years. And it was like kind of the 90s. And there was a lot of kind of commercial money. And I was doing stuff like lots and lots of TV commercials that could actually, make a living doing that at the time. And, but it was never satisfying to me. I always wanted to be in movies, and I always wanted to do TV. I just wasn't good enough. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so in 2003, I decided to apply to graduate schools, like conservatory programs. And I chose to go to Brown University in Providence and get my MFA in acting, hold myself up for 3 years in theater. Yeah. And it changed my life. It absolutely changed I've been working ever since.
So after you graduated Brown, what was the next step? Did you go back to New York, or did you go to LA right from there?
No, I went to New York. That's kind of what you do as a theater actor. You go to New York and you prove yourself there, and did a lot of downtown theater and a lot of like kind of small roles on TV, some commercials here and there. But it all started, the on-camera stuff started picking up very quickly for me. And before I knew it, I was working, and then, there were ups and downs. There were times when I was broke and working as a waiter. And then, it was just 1 year. I worked as a waiter, and I gave myself a whole year. And then after I quit that job, I put myself on tape for Predators, and that's how I booked Predators. And that changed my life forever. Yeah.
So what was your first TV gig that you got? I know you said commercials, but what about for like a TV show?
I think I had a small part in Law and Order, just like every New York actor. It was my first TV gig. Yeah. Yeah, I played some cop, like really, really tiny role.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, you did a couple other shows too, like Jim Carrey's Kidding and Supergirl and Bosch, and
that's right.
Like what's been like the most one you've enjoyed so far, before Hunters, obviously?
I gotta say, Kidding was probably the most. I don't want to. I feel bad. Like they were all. I've been fortunate in my career that like role after role have been kind of really artistically satisfying roles, regardless of the kind of show that it's been. I've always found something great in the roles I played, but Kidding was something very special to be able to work with Jim Carrey, obviously, but also Mike's storyline is opposite Catherine Keener, who was a legend for me, like one of my heroes, and to be playing her lover, opposite her, and to have these very kind of unique, strange, artsy kind of scenes with her was the highlight of my TV career. Yeah, that's right.
How was it meeting Jim on set?
Oh, he's such a gracious and gentle, nice guy. he's obviously Jim Carrey, and at one time was the biggest star in Hollywood. That's very clear when he walks in the room. He just has that energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, very gracious guy. I'll never forget at the premiere for the show, he did a beeline for me and was like, "Hey man, I really enjoyed your scenes," and he just that made my night. I was like, "Oh my God, Jim Carrey, love my scenes."
That's awesome.
So cool. Yeah.
So now you recently started Amazon Prime's Hunters. For the listeners that haven't seen the show or haven't heard the show, can you give us a little brief description what the show's about?
Sure. The story centers. Sorry, these people are walking by. Can we take a quick pause? Maybe,
Sure.
Or should I keep going? Okay. Sorry. This is a little loud. So the show takes place in 1977. It's the summer of 1977 in New York City. There's a young boy named Jonah, played by Logan Lerman. He's the heart of our show, and he is struggling, kind of selling weed and unsure of what his future is going to be. But he's clearly head and shoulders intelligent above everyone else around him. And his grandmother is murdered. And it takes him down this hole, and he discovers a whole world that he finds out that she is been involved in a Nazi hunting scheme. So she's a member of a group of Nazi hunters. And within that world, I play one of the Nazi hunters. And the group is led by a character named Meyer Offerman, who's played by none other than Al Pacino. So it's a coming-of-age story. He's a boy at the beginning of the series, and through all these kind of adventures that he takes, he becomes a man. Yeah.
So you played Joe. Tell us about your audition for the show when you first heard about it.
You're never going to believe it, but I was shooting Supergirl in Vancouver at the time, and a friend of mine actually was in the writer's room, and she said, "Hey, listen, you should really talk to your agent about this role on the show that I'm writing on. I think you would be perfect for it." And I have lots of writer friends that are on different shows, and they've all kind of pitched me in the past, and it's never worked out. So I kind of didn't take it seriously. But then I read the script, and my agent sent me the script and said, "This is my favorite pilot ever." And I read it, and I was like, "This is my favorite pilot ever." And I read the sides. As you know, in the pilot, Joe doesn't feature very heavily, but they gave me some audition sides from the seventh episode. And when I read the kind of speech that Joe makes, I knew right away I had to play this role. And so I did what every other actor does. I was alone in my hotel room, but I contacted my wife, and she Skyped in on the iPad, and I set up my iPhone, and I auditioned opposite an iPad and sent that tape in. And, it's my third series with Amazon, so maybe that helped in the audition process. But that was it. I never met anyone. They offered me the role after.
That's awesome. So I mentioned you played Joe, and he's part of the soldier in the group. How would you describe that character?
Joe's a damaged soul. He's a Vietnam veteran, Special Forces. He's Asian American. He's Japanese American. He grew up in a American concentration camp at the end of World War II. So he has a conflicted relationship with authority, government, specifically fascistic tendencies. And I think there's something in the struggle, the Jewish American struggle, that he relates with. And Meyer Offerman kind of takes Joe in at his lowest point in his life. He's just come back from the war. He's unable to get a job. He doesn't know what to do. The only thing he's ever known how to do is to kill people. Like, his only job has been a soldier, and his transition back into regular society hasn't been smooth. It's at a time where people are were very disillusioned with Vietnam veterans and the whole war effort. So it's a complicated character.
Yeah. So, what did you do to prepare for the role? And what kind of research did you do? after you got the part?
Well, it's interesting. I remember as a child, my girlfriend at the time, my high school girlfriend's father, telling me a story about his best friend in art school who was Japanese American and was drafted into the Vietnam War, and that stuck with me forever. The description of what this gentleman had become after he came back, and he said he was a shell of the human being that he was, and he was never the same, and it affected their friendship, and it affected this guy's life, and that stuck with me since I was 17 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I've always kept that in my heart, and kind of jumping into the process of creating this character, I've always used that as the jumping off point for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it took me down a hole of researching kind of the subculture of Vietnam War veterans, which is Asian American war veterans. And it turns out that the kind of incidence of PTSD and trauma from the war is even greater amongst Asian American kind of veterans. If you could only imagine, people going to a war that you don't necessarily believe in and having to kill people that look just like you. And, coming from a place maybe within your own ranks where you're being discriminated against as well. It's a very, very tricky situation.
So what do you think was like your biggest challenge portraying the character and connecting with them?
Well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy in person and on set, and so having there are characters on set that get to have a little more fun and have a little more flair in their characters, and I guess my flares within the character tend to be violent flares.
Yeah.
But to have to kind of suppress that part of my personality has been it was a little tough, and I'm not going to say this is the dream job. It's not a hard job necessarily to be on set with Al Pacino and be a lead of one of the biggest shows on TV. That's fantastic, but to have to put yourself in that mode, sometimes on occasion I would take it with me outside of set, and that wasn't fun. Yeah.
Is there for your character, was there a real life person that your character was based off? Because I know that Hunters was inspired by true events.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah. A lot of the true events are the events that happened during the Holocaust, because and they're based on stories from David's grandmother,
Okay.
and they're also like historical figures that are characters within the world of our show. So those are the parts, but Joe himself is, as far as I know, is not based on a true character.
Now you mentioned you worked with alongside Oscar winner Al Pacino. How was it being on the set with him and working with him?
He's a legend. He is a legend, and we were all very much in awe of him initially. But he has a very disarming way about him. I think he wants to be one of the guys, and it's he set a good example of that early on, and I feel like we kept it pretty loose on set.
Now, how was it working with the rest of the cast? Because there's
Right.
I mentioned earlier, Al Pacino's on it, but you also have Josh Radnor, you have Logan Lerman. It's like you have a big cast on there.
Yeah, and Carol Kane and Saul Rubinek.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Dylan Baker, Lena Olin, all heroes of mine. Yeah. I've through my career, I've had, obviously, about Kidding, but Predators was chock full of Oscar winners as well, and The Bourne Legacy as well. So I've been a part of those kind of groups, but this is for sure the longest period of time I've been with this many actors that are I guess that acclaimed and famous. It was 6 months of shooting for us. So, and we were shooting together a lot of the time, all day, every day. at the end of the day, it's acting. It's the same.
Yeah.
Like we're telling stories in the same way that you would tell us. Fundamentally, the same way you would tell a story when you're a child or when you're in college. It's just the level of skill goes up and up and up. But yeah.
What was that? So, like, what was your favorite?
Right.
What was your favorite scene that you were in? You think?
There are a few scenes with Josh Radnor. I'd have to say, kind of, they paired us up quite a bit, and we have kind of a bit of an odd couple dynamic. He's very much like a loose cannon, and I'm pretty like kind of restrained and in both my dialogue and my behavior. And so there's a moment in one of the latter episodes of the season where you get Joe finally kind of lets loose and reveals a little bit about himself or a lot about himself, and that was fun for me to finally have that catharsis, to be able to get that off my shoulders a little bit.
So, like,
yeah, he's definitely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish it.
No. I'm done.
I was gonna say, like, so throughout the years of your acting, I know you mentioned earlier you do a lot of self-taping. What do you like better, self-taping or auditioning in front of directors and cast members?
Oh man, it's such a mixed bag, to be honest. Like nowadays, writers' rooms are all over the place and actors are all over the place. Like I'm often all over we're all over the world. And so most of the time it's out of necessity. But to be honest, I gotta be honest. At first it was a little bit difficult, but now that I've gotten used to it, it's helped me become a better screen actor, because unlike the audition process where you go into a room, you rarely ever get to see your own audition.
Yeah.
So nowadays, if you're self-taping, you get to shoot as much as you possibly can, and until you feel like you get it right. And then in that process, you get to learn, that wasn't the greatest take for this reason. Okay, let me try it this way, and especially as it pertains to TV, the days move pretty quickly, and so you don't have that much time to futz around, and so the more prepared you are, the more skilled you are as a screen actor, the better.
Now, like I said, we mentioned that you've starred alongside with like so many wonderful actors. Is there somebody that you're hoping you could work with someday that you haven't worked with yet?
Absolutely, so many. I'd love to get Daniel Day-Lewis out of retirement if he ever comes out of retirement.
He comes out of retirement like once every 5 years, 10 years.
It seems like this time it's for real, though.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I love guys like Christian Bale and Joaquin Phoenix, and one of my all-time favorites is Benicio del Toro, Gary Oldman, and then of course, on my bucket list is Robert De Niro, because he is the guy that made me want to be an actor.
That's right.
If you're listening out there, Mr. De Niro, I would love to work with you.
So, do you have what's your dream role? Do you have like a dream role you want to play someday?
Yes, I do. I think I would like to be the lead of something, and that sounds very broad in general, but for an Asian American actor, that's it's few and far between those roles. It doesn't. I know that's so broad in general, but there's so many roles within that kind of genre that I would like to play. But a thriller preferably, where I'm the lead.
Interesting. Where do you see yourself 10, 20 years from now?
10, 20 years from now, I hope I'm not living in a city. I think I'd like to live either outside of LA and New York. I've spent all of my life in either LA or New York, and I'm ready for a house. I'm ready for like some trees and fresh air. Yeah.
So when you're not working, like on your downtime, I know you're a dad and everything, but what do you enjoy doing?
I like riding motorcycles. That's the other thing. If I had property, I'd love to get some dirt bikes. I ride horses, believe it or not. I'd love to have horses someday. Love to have like a little farm, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you need to buy a house like out in the valley, out in California.
Well, I would, maybe I'd prefer to be on the East Coast somewhere, like
Yeah?
more woodsy. Yeah. I think I could do that. Yeah. I think I could do that. But who knows? I'm born and bred city rat, so
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't last very long. Other than that, in a previous life, I was a photographer. I worked as a photo assistant, and I also continued to take photos of my own. So I think I'll continue to do that
There
and
you
continue
go.
with my personal work. Yeah.
Do you have any other upcoming projects that you could tell the listeners about?
I do. I have a film called The Beautiful Dreamer, which will be premiering at the Method Fest in Los Angeles on March 20th. And then it'll be screening later in San Francisco at the San Francisco International Film Festival in April. I'm not sure of the date yet there. And right now I'm in New York rehearsing a play called The Antipodes. It's a new Annie Baker play, and it'll be opening at the Taper at the end of March and going through the end of April.
Oh, wow.
It's a weird kind of situation. We're rehearsing here, but performing in LA. But it's a fantastic play by Pulitzer Prize winning playwright Annie Baker, and it's just blowing my mind. It's a play about a writer's room. You're not quite sure what kind of writer's room it is, but it's a writer's room, and so it's very different from the kind of stuff you typically see me doing on screen. There's very little action or no action, and it's people talking at a table. Yeah.
So you enjoy going back and forth between working with TV, film, and then doing some theater at the same time?
Dude, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be able to have the opportunity and to be able to do that kind of thing.
That's great. That's great.
I like being able to do, comedies like Kidding, and then more kind of actiony roles like I'm doing in The Hunt or The Bourne Legacy or Predators. But I also like to do theater. And so, yeah.
Is there a play that you hope you get your hands on someday to play for theater?
Yeah, Hamlet. I would like to play Hamlet.
Really? A lot of people say that.
It's the ultimate actor's role. It's a cliche, I know. There's other Shakespearean roles I like to play. When I'm old enough, I'd like to play Richard II and eventually King Lear, absolutely. But not just Shakespearean roles. There's I'd like to do some Pinter, some Betrayal. There's just so many roles, and that's part of the reason why I kind of spending more and more time in New York, because that's where the theater is at here in the United States. Yeah.
Do you ever? I know it's a big theater community in Chicago too. Do you ever go there?
I've only gone to watch things. I've never actually performed. I'm a fan of the work that's there, but nowadays with two kids and a kind of pretty busy schedule, it's harder and harder for me to justify spending time outside of LA or New York. This is the first play I've done in a few years, and it seems to be the way. Like every few years, I'll have a little pocket of time to do a play.
Have they mentioned anything about season 2 yet for Hunters? Or is that still?
Man, I wish I could tell you, but no, I haven't gotten any official word. But if you've seen the episodes, you'll know that it's not planned to be a limited series. It's planned to be a proper series. So, I mean, I love the show, so my biased opinion is yes, there will be, but that's you're not hearing it from the
There you go. Hey, lastly, how can the listeners find you on social media?
I'm more of an Instagram guy, so I post more regularly to Instagram. You can find me at Louis Louis Ozawa Ozawa on Instagram.
All right, Louis. This was fun. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, everybody. That's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Man Cave Chronicles podcast.
I finally get my man cave.
You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the MCC Podcast and our website, themccpodcast.com. Until next time.